look forward to hearing your input on this important project, the proposed construction of a multi-purpose machine gun range by the Massachusetts Army National Guard at Joint Base Cape Cod. The first part of the evening is an informational session, during which I will provide some background on EPA's authority and the process. EPA is here to listen, so there will be no question and answer session. Taping for the public hearing will begin after this session and continue throughout the evening. At the start of the informational session, on behalf of EPA Region 1, I'd like to share some general statements. EPA respects the critical role of the Massachusetts Army National Guard in their mission to protect the Commonwealth against threats to citizens and their livelihood. The Massachusetts Army National Guard is one of a number of Department of Defense military units at Joint Base Cape Cod. These units have worked over decades to train soldiers, while at the same time partnered with state and federal agencies to investigate environmental conditions and, as necessary, make cleanup in order to restore Cape Cod aquifer. For decades, EPA has worked and continues to work alongside the Massachusetts National Guard, the Environmental Management Commission, and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection to address contamination and support the legacy of more than $1 billion of investments in investigations and cleanups at Joint Base Cape Cod. Concerning the proposed multi-purpose machine gun range, EPA said it would take as much time as necessary to fully evaluate and understand the details of the design, construction, operations, maintenance, and monitoring of the project. Now that we are here tonight after 20 months, EPA wishes to acknowledge and thank members of the many teams from the Massachusetts National Guard, the Massachusetts DEP, and the EMC, with whom we have worked cooperatively over the many months. And some of those team members are here tonight. Thank you all for your cooperation. Now let's begin the PowerPoint presentation. In addition to EPA's role in conducting and overseeing environmental cleanups, EPA has a unique obligation under the Safe Drinking Water Act to protect sole source aquifers, like the Cape Cod aquifer, thus avoiding expensive and consequential environmental cleanups. The Cape Cod sole source aquifer is a vulnerable and valuable drinking water source for nearly 220,000-year-long residents of Cape Cod. In the course of our discussions, you have heard the following statement many times. There is no reasonably available alternative drinking water source should the aquifer become contaminated. Next. In August 2021, EPA Region 1 elected to initiate the sole source aquifer project review for the multi-purpose machine gun range. In April 2023, EPA Region 1 released its draft determination that the proposed multi-purpose machine gun range, if constructed, may contaminate the aquifer so as to create a significant public health hazard. You will soon hear specific information about the factors that EPA followed as part of the process outlined in regulations. In general, the following project-specific conditions were also important to EPA in reaching its draft determination. Next. Those conditions include the sensitivity of the aquifer, the existing environmental conditions, the scope of the proposed gun range's design, operations, monitoring, and maintenance, and the projected long-term use and associated contaminant loading. Next. In terms of history, here are some additional key dates in EPA's efforts. First, there is a long history of EPA's oversight and cleanup programs at Joint Base Cape Cod, starting way back in 1989. To date, under enforcement orders, there are 45 separate areas within Joint Base Cape Cod that have been or under investigations, cleanup, or both. As previously stated, EPA's efforts to review the proposed machine gun range project under the Sole Source Aquifer program started in 2021 and continues today. Along the way, there have been many interactions with all of the parties. During the review, EPA utilized information available through the many military cleanup investigations and efforts overseen by EPA and other state agencies and commissions, and responses from the Massachusetts Army National Guard to hundreds of EPA requests and questions. Next. Now let's talk about EPA's authority. The Sole Source Aquifer Program was enacted by Congress under 1424E of the Safe Drinking Water Act. The statute grants EPA the power to designate certain groundwater aquifers as sole source aquifers. We did that in 1982. EPA Region 1 designated the Cape Cod aquifer as a sole source aquifer because it met two criteria. The first criteria is that the aquifer provides at least 50% of the drinking water to its service area. Indeed, the percentage here in Cape Cod is much greater than 50%. And the second criteria, again the phrase, there is no reasonably available alternative drinking water source should the aquifer become contaminated. We are here today because, once designated, EPA has the discretion to review proposed projects within a sole source aquifer to determine if the project may contaminate the aquifer so as to create a significant public health hazard. The word may is important in the interpretation of our authority, which I will further explain. Next. Thank you. It is clear from the legislative history that Congress intended EPA to take a preventative approach. And that is when we review proposed projects that may contaminate sole source aquifers. In the face of uncertainty, the region is permitted to find that the aquifer may be endangered. In EPA's view, a preventative approach is reasonable and warranted because of decades of environmental impacts that have already damaged the Cape Cod aquifer. Next. Okay, with that background in mind, we wanted to share specific definitions and criteria that EPA used in reaching our draft determination. The first one is the definition of significant hazard. Significant hazard can mean any contaminant that, number one, which cause or may cause the aquifer to exceed any maximum contaminant level provided in any national drinking water standard at any point where the water may be used for drinking water purposes. The second criteria is a contaminant which may otherwise adversely affect the health of persons. We think that means that that would cover emerging contaminants that don't yet have drinking water standards. And finally, significant hazard could be a contaminant which may require a public water supply system to install additional treatment to address the adverse impact. Next. The regulations require the regional administrator to review the proposed project, taking all relevant factors into account. The following factors listed in regulations were used to guide EPA's draft determination. Those factors are as follows. Number 1, the extent of possible public health hazard. Number 2, planning, design, operations, maintenance, and monitoring measures as it relates to the project. Number 3, the extent and effectiveness of state and local control over possible releases to the aquifer. Number 4, the cumulative and secondary impacts of the proposed project. And number 5, the expected environmental benefits of the proposed project. For more details of EPA analysis of the project review, including a detailed explanation of these 5 factors, please check out EPA's website, and that is in your informational fact sheet that was given out today. There is a report that provides in detail how EPA considered these factors. The title of that report is Sole Source Aquifer Project Review of the Multi-Purpose Machine Gun Range proposed by the Massachusetts Army National Guard to be constructed at Joint Base Cape Cod. I know, it's a very long title. Next. Okay, let's finish with next steps. EPA elected to offer a multi-pronged public engagement process. In fact, for the sole source aquifer program, it's most unusual to hold a public hearing. For this proposed project, we are offering 3 options for public comment. You can see them as follows. For written comments, email it to the email address provided above. For verbal comments, there is a voicemail box available to you. And of course, today in person at the public hearing. It's important to note that the end of the comment period is June 26th of this year. Now you might be asking, what next? That would be the next slide. EPA will review all timely comments. If after consideration of the comments and information, the regional administrator continues to believe that the proposed machine gun range may pose a significant public health hazard, then he will forward that information to the EPA administrator in Washington for a final decision. And should that decision by the administrator in Washington become final, then there will be no commitment of federal funds that will be allowed. Next. And that's it. Again, thank you for attending, and now we'll start the formal public hearing.
Hearing is to accept oral comments on EPA's draft determination under the Safe Drinking Water Act that a multi-purpose machine gun range proposed by the Massachusetts Army National Guard may contaminate the Cape Cod aquifer so as to create a significant public health hazard. EPA is seeking public comment to inform a final determination on this matter. The public comment period began on April 27th and will end on June 26th, 2023. Please note that EPA is not able to respond to questions or comments during this public hearing. EPA's draft determination is available online if you want to read the entire document. We brought copies of a fact sheet summarizing EPA's action. Copies are available at the desk where you checked in. If you didn't get one when checking in, feel free to grab one on your way out. The fact sheet includes instructions on how to submit written comments. You may also call EPA at 617-918-1800 and leave oral comments on a voicemail box set up for this matter. Comments shared orally tonight on the voicemail box or submitted in writing will be given the same consideration. This hearing is being broadcast via Zoom. We cannot accept comments over Zoom, but anyone joining the meeting via Zoom can submit written comments by sending them to the email address that was shared earlier, or you can leave oral comments by calling the voicemail box. In a few minutes, I will begin inviting folks who have indicated they would like to provide comments to come up to the microphone at the podium. When it's your turn to speak, please state your name and the town you reside in or your affiliation. Please speak directly into the microphone. Please speak slowly and clearly to ensure that your comments are heard and accurately captured for the record. Each commenter may speak for 3 minutes. I will hold up this yellow dot when you have less than 1 minute left to comment, and I will hold up this red dot when you've spoken for 3 minutes. If you expect your comments will be longer than 3 minutes in length, please summarize your major points and provide EPA with a written copy of the full text of your comments. If you wish to submit written comments, you can hand them to me tonight, or you can send them to the email address provided on the fact sheet. After all comments have been heard, I will close the hearing. At the conclusion of the hearing, please see an EPA representative if you have any questions on how to submit comments. Because EPA's sole source aquifer review was conducted in response to the multi-purpose machine gun range proposed by the Massachusetts Army National Guard, we are going to welcome the Guard to provide first comments. We have approved the Guard's request to comment for longer than 3 minutes. After the Guard provides its comments, I will invite tribal leaders and/or federal, state, or local elected officials or their representatives to provide comments. At this point, I would like to welcome Colonel John Bagaglio to speak on behalf of the Guard. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Colonel John Bagaglio, Garrison Commander of Camp Edwards. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and present comments this evening. The Massachusetts Army National Guard will provide a detailed written response to the draft sole source aquifer decision document and wanted to take this opportunity to share with the public and the EPA the more salient points of our response. For over 20 years, the Massachusetts Army National Guard has worked under the guidance of the Environmental Management Commission, or EMC, and in collaboration with the EPA to protect the natural resources, specifically groundwater, of the reserve while conducting compatible military training. Compatible military training has included troop maneuvers, aviation and ground vehicle operations, and qualification of weapon systems, including cruiser weapons, more commonly known as machine guns. The MPMG project will allow members of the Guard to train on new federally mandated standards versus being limited to familiarization and limited distance courses of fire. Machine gun qualification has occurred on the site since 2015 with the full support of the EMC under the purview of the EPA. The requirement to meet new qualification standards led to the award of a congressionally mandated military construction project. In the process of receiving the project, environmental reviews were completed in accordance with the National Environmental Protection Act and the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, resulting in a certificate from the Commonwealth Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs stating the MPMG project, quote, adequately and properly complies with MEPA and its implementing regulations, and subsequently received a finding of no significant impact from the National Guard Bureau. Protection of natural resources is a focus of these reviews, and during the NEPA process, the EPA originally determined the SSA review was not required. National Guard programs bring funding to help identify and protect priority habitats and the species that live within them. Our natural resources team has helped identify 43 protected species, which are more abundant at Camp Edwards than anywhere in New England, thanks to active habitat management. Conservation programs have already implemented habitat mitigation for this range on nearly 2,500 acres, investing over $1.5 million thanks to proactive conservation planning and support from the National Guard Bureau. One of the benefits of military training within the reserve is that it provides the required activity and funding to support a disturbance-based ecosystem. If the training stops, much of this protected habitat will be at risk. The collaboration and partnerships between the EMC, EPA, and the Mass Army National Guard has demonstrated that best management practices, or BMPs, and adaptive range management have been developed for the safe operations of small arms ranges while protecting the natural resources of the reserve. These BMPs have been based on extensive testing, monitoring, and exploration of various technologies to mitigate contamination to the aquifer. All of this collaborative hard work led to the EPA Region 1 modifying the 2002 administrative order, leaving the management of small arms ranges under the supervision of the EMC. The EPA's justification was that 20 years of science has shown that, quote, the overall results of groundwater sampling indicate that small arms ranges are not a source of contamination above action levels or any significant groundwater contamination. The same EPA document further stated that, quote, long-term groundwater monitoring with land use controls to protect monitoring wells would protect the Cape Cod aquifer and is protective of human health. Studies were conducted over this time period for several of the contaminants of concern listed in the draft document. These studies that replicated maximum potential demonstrated that lead, antimony, nitroglycerin, and others do not transport to the water table. The latest study on copper transport had a similar finding. We do acknowledge the EPA had some uncertainty with the results, and we kindly ask for the opportunity to re-examine collaboratively to assuage any concerns the EPA may have.
We appreciate this opportunity to share a statement on behalf of Senator Warren, Senator Markey, and Congressman Keith. The Cape Cod aquifer serves as a sole source water for residents throughout the Cape Cod region. As a result, the protection of this resource is and should continue to be of the utmost importance. This sole source aquifer underpins the health and economy of this region, and we must keep it safe, especially when consistent and clean drinking water supplies across the Commonwealth are under threat from contamination and climate change. The delegation would like to commend the Environmental Protection Agency for the time and effort that it took to conduct this thorough analysis that was requested by Senators Warren, Markey, and Congressman Keating in April 2021 to determine the risk the proposed machine gun range poses to public health, public safety, and the environment. These results will help ensure the best decisions are made for Cape Cod communities. We would also like to thank all of you gathered here tonight and those who have submitted comments to the EPA during this public comment period. Your feedback is important and will aid in the final decision-making process. Senators Warren and Markey and Congressman Keating are committed to the continued partnerships with all agencies in order to prevent harm to public health and the environment. Thank you again to everyone here tonight, and we look forward to continuing to elevate the perspectives of local officials and community members as the process continues. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sandra Feynman Silva, and I live in Falmouth. And this is a shorter version of the longer version that I will submit by email. In 1989, the 22,000-acre Mass Military Reservation site was designated a federal Superfund site following toxic contamination of the Cape's drinking water supply from pollution at the base. As of 2019, more than $1.2 billion had been spent on investigation and cleanup activities at Joint Base Cape Cod. The current debate over siting of the machine gun range is a case of those who ignore the past are doomed to repeat it, and my Sankofa pin makes the same statement. Is it really what we want to do? The current machine gun range proposal, estimated to cost $11.5 million, will require cutting 170 acres of rare scrub pine and oak and transform more than 200 acres to a wasteland for machine gun training. The 7,500-acre range will be located directly on the Sagamore Lens, the sole source aquifer providing fresh drinking water to 5 Upper Cape towns, and most likely far more than that on the Mid and Lower Cape as well. In their own words, EPA Regional Administrator David W. Cash said, Cape Cod sole source aquifer is a public health resource that must be protected. EPA recognizes the need for our armed forces to maintain readiness and provide training to service members. However, the risk of irreparable damage to the only drinking water source on Cape Cod is too significant. That's a quote from the document, the draft document. This years-long campaign to cite an ill-conceived and ill-advised machine gun range at Joint Base Cape Cod must end. Other options for machine gun training are available. Joint Base Cape Cod personnel can no longer serve as both developers and so-called custodians of this fragile, highly vulnerable ecosystem. Joint Base Cape Cod Major Alex McDonough, Safety Officer and Deputy Base Operations Manager, characterized the debate over the gun range in a recent Cape Cod Times article this way, quote, "We don't want to poison anyone. We don't want to poison ourselves, and we certainly don't want to poison anyone in the surrounding towns," unquote. Well, I think you already have. And maybe you should just stop and take the advice of DEP experts. The DEP draft determination concludes that, and I quote, "The Safe Drinking Water Act mandates a strong preventative approach where a drinking water supply is highly dependent on a single aquifer. And EPA's draft determination is based on protecting Cape Cod's sole source of drinking water." It concludes, and I quote, "The proposed project has the potential to contaminate the aquifer so as to create a significant public health hazard, costing millions, if not billions, to repair. I urge you to adopt the EPA draft determination and end this nightmare. We have paid enough for this misguided proposal after years cleaning up early contamination on the Upper Cape. Now is the time to permanently protect the health and well-being of our citizens, visitors, and Mother Earth."
Good evening, and thank you for taking my comment tonight. My name is Rosemary Drager Carey. I live in North Falmouth, and I'm co-chair of the Climate Action Group 350 Cape Cod. We're a grassroots community of about 500 people living across the Cape and Islands who are committed to fighting the climate crisis. We're also a member of the Cape-wide coalition of organizations who strongly oppose this project. When we first learned of the multi-purpose machine gun range project proposed in 2020, we were dismayed by the plan to clear cut 170 acres of forested land to make way for a massive machine gun range. We were concerned for the loss of habitats, disruption to our ecosystem, the release of carbon into the atmosphere, and future loss of carbon sequestration value of the trees. We were equally shocked to learn the project would sit atop the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve, a 15,000 parcel acre created by the Commonwealth for the permanent protection of water systems and habitats and ecosystems. With the millions of rounds fired into the KD range, introduced the risk that toxic chemicals would find their way into our water supply. Was the environmental assessment conducted by the Army National Guard, which found no significant impact on these concerns, rigorous enough, especially for a project that could contaminate drinking water for all of Cape Cod? How could such a project even be proposed when more than $1 billion taxpayer dollars have been spent cleaning up past contamination at the base, and it's still not cleaned up? The EPA's sole source aquifer project review now confirms our deepest concerns about the risk to our water. An estimated 1.3 million bullets per year would be used at the range. That's a fourfold increase in the total annual bullet loads deposited on the land above the aquifer. Meanwhile, contaminants have already found their way into the soils and pore water underlying the small and expiring ranges, even with the effective management of those activities. That means the threat is only amplified with the additional rounds. The report also details the potential health risks associated with exposure to drinking water from the contaminants. Antimony associated with increased cholesterol, chromium, allergic dermatitis, copper, gastrointestinal distress, lead, physical and neurological development delays in children, and manganese. We all want our military to be ready to protect us, and we're grateful for their service. But a project that poses risks to our water supply and a public health concern, risk is unacceptable. We simply cannot allow this.
The other way. I care very deeply about our woods, I care about our water, I care about our fragile Cape Cod. I moved here in 2021 and immediately attended a rally here in Sandwich to express our views about the expansion of the gun range. So I'm going to yield. I don't have anything important to say except that I believe that if I don't raise my voice and say these things, then lots of people that aren't here, for whom I speak, I know that I've generated 50 letters, but I'm here to just say we care deeply about our water supply and want very, very much for this, for the report to be finalized and for Governor Healy to take a position in support of the EPA findings.
A little nervous. I only put my name on the list in case I had something to say, that I didn't want to miss the chance. I'm not a Cape Codder. I'm a wash ashore. I came in 1962. I was stationed at Otis in the Air Force. I was in the Guard for many years. I'm also a Woods Hole oceanographic employee, retiree, but I'm not going to let that affect me in any way. I don't have any expertise as far as good or bad. I guess what I'd like to say is two things. One, I really do support the military and their need for training. It makes a lot of sense to me. What doesn't make quite so much sense is Cape Cod the only place they can do it? I worry about this place. The other only point I had to make was the word may, used by the EPA. A previous speaker alleged that the only way that he would support something if there were absolute answers. Well, we don't have absolute answers, and the word may scares me simply because if we get it wrong, Cape Cod goes away, and I really worry about that. I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Grew up in this town. Spent a lot of time in the base growing up. My father was in the Marine Corps. I want to put things in perspective. How many golf courses are on the Cape? Does anyone know? There's 27 public golf courses and 19 private golf courses. Do you know how many metric tons of chemicals are used on these golf courses on a daily basis throughout the years, over the years? We talk about chemical loading on our property, single source aquifers. Bullets aren't the problem, folks, okay? We have fertilizers that you're using every day to take care of your lawns to make them green. I love the game of golf, don't get me wrong, but that's not a necessity, it's a luxury. Our range for our servicemen and women is a necessity for our freedoms. And we need that here locally. 100 years this base was here, active. I am for the gun range. If you want to put something down with the EPA, take a look at all the other chemicals that are used here. The gun range is pennies of copper in a wishing well compared to the metric tons of poisons that are used for golf courses. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'm going to just reiterate what my son said, and that was my beef. I'm all for the military, and they need the training. I'm for them setting up this base. I know that I know the EPA, and I know that the base is going to make sure that things stay clean. My more important concern is what my son said. Everybody uses these fertilizers. If the EPA really wants to worry about our water, which I worry about them selling Roundup. Everybody uses Roundup, which is the same thing that killed my husband. Agent Orange is in there. And people are using this stuff and getting rid of their weeds. That should be more of a concern than some bullets that are copper. There's no chemicals in the air. Very good. That's all I've got to say, is that if the EPA really is concerned about our drinking water, then they should ban all these chemicals that people are putting on their lawns and on the golf courses. I thank you for listening.
Good evening, my name is Andrew Gottlieb. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Preserve Cape Cod. I'd just like to start off by saying that one can be both in favor of clean water and a strong national defense. The fact that it's been characterized as you have to be one or the other is a shame. In an email dated March 24th, 2021, on behalf of the Guard, General Christopher Foe wrote to members of Congressman Keating's office saying, quote, honestly, just the phrase further deeper review or environmental impact statement coming from the delegation will sink this project. Lacking context, although we got the email having issued a public records request, lacking context, one was left to wonder why. I think the findings of the EPA draft study offer a reasonable explanation as to why the Guard was concerned about further independent review of this proposal. Unlike the environmental assessment managed by the Guard, where 367 comments were provided, 330 of which expressed concerns about this range, 9 which supported it, and a small number, 28, asking for more information. All of those 330 comments were essentially ignored in the final environmental assessment, meaning this must have been the perfect project. But in fact, what the Guard, or what EPA has determined to be the case, with an impartial review, has revealed what those ignored public comments were concerned about to be in fact true, which is that we already have a highly degraded, impacted aquifer from prior military training activities. We are continuing to understand the full scope of the contamination that is currently impacting water supplies in the town of Falmouth, the town of Mashpee, who both have public water supplies offline due to new contamination recently discovered coming from the base. And the towns surrounding the base don't have any place else left to go to get additional water supply when that water supply is needed because of ongoing contamination. The risk here is too great. EPA effectively and appropriately used the Safe Drinking Water Act back in 1989. You're asserting your authority to do so again here. Your determinations were correct. We support your determination, and we support finalization of the finding by the administrator. Thank you.
I'm Kathy Fox Alfano from Bourne. And I'd like to say that this is a multi-generational decision. Our children, their children, and beyond trust us now to make the right decision for clean drinking water on the Cape. Now, I do support the military, but I have to believe that there are other places for a machine gun range. There's no other place for our sole source aquifer. We have no alternative. Our public health and our economy are at risk with this. To say that there's no threat, I have to say that how did we spend $1 billion cleaning up the base? I agree we need to cut nitrogen and other chemicals, and that is definitely true. But I have to say that just if one person gets sick from this, it obliterates the need for this machine gun range. And I fully support the EPA on opposing the machine gun range. Thank you.
My name is Jean Prendergast. I've lived in Sandwich for about 30 years. My husband's family has lived on the Cape for 100 years, or parts of it, of his family. I am so against this range. And the first thing that I thought of when I saw this map, and I've seen it on other maps as this has been discussed for about a year, is how close it is to the Forestdale School. That's 1,000 K through 3rd graders. And it represents a significant taxpayer outlay for a Sandwich. If that school becomes inhospitable for learning, that's going to cost us all a lot of money. And so that concerns me. And everyone has spoken so eloquently, I won't repeat things, but that list of things that the EPA looked at, one of them was effectiveness of state or local control. I think that's a tough thing to monitor that base. I think that, who are we gonna send from Sandwich to go in there? I mean, who do we have? We don't have, and I think a lot of agencies, even the EPA, you don't have tons and tons of people in trucks that can just walk into the base and see things. What they find out is when it has already seeped into the water. I have well water, and from the day we've moved here, we have had bottled water delivered to the house. We bathe with the water, but we drink bottled water. And I hate to think how much that costs over the 30 years that we've lived here. So I would really appeal, I'm so happy to see our senators and our congressional delegation. I'm so happy to see that you're here, but I hope you stay on this. This is really important and we need your help. And I want to thank the EPA for their draft ruling, and I hope you will protect us, protect our environment. If we have to bring in water to this peninsula, we'll all lose our home values, and this will become a really tough place to live. And there's a place in Vermont and there's a place in Air where our soldiers can go and train. This isn't about we don't love our soldiers or we don't care for the military. That's not what this is about. And it's not that we don't care about nitrogen and Roundup. I would love to see a law on the books. We try to get that through the Congress right now, but I would love to see that. But I want to thank everyone that's standing up for us, and please continue to do so.
Okay? Yes. I want everybody to raise a hand that's gone more than 3 days without water. How do you feel?
Dry.
The average person can only live a little over 3 days without water. The longest person lasts on record is about 19 days. I've been to survival school, cold weather, warm weather, and after 3 days you get thirsty. There's no doubt that the National Guard needs a range. And I spent time in Vietnam and I know what Agent Orange can do. My concern, obviously, and the main concern is the groundwater. And the only thing, I think they have a range on the base, I don't know, you can't ask questions. But the only thing I can see for range on odors is an enclosed range, and that would be very expensive. But I belong to Gunworks, and they have a small range, which is enclosed, and it's only good for 50 yards. And I think they ought to look at some way. You never know where money's coming from, and to me, I don't have a lot of faith in government. It's hard to believe anybody nowadays, and AI is just coming down the road. So the only thing I would support is an indoor range. And again, my concern is the groundwater. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Tom Courier. I'm retired from the Army National Guard. I spent probably 16 years as an environmental person for facility engineers. I guess my point is that there's too much uncertainty. There's no known. And the fact that we have, it's uncertain as to what the outcome of this range would be 100 years from now, I would say in order to ensure ourselves that we are going to have a groundwater for a number of years, we should reject the fact that we should reject this gun range and put it someplace where there are no soil aquifers.
Steve Blakely, I live in East Sandwich. I'm a fairly recent washershore. I came from Virginia, Northern Virginia, not terribly far from Quantico. Happily far enough from Quantico. If any of you know what's been going on down there, that is one of the most severely polluted groundwater situations of any military base in the country, and there have in fact been real health problems because of it. Having said that, I come to this particular issue inclined to support the Guard. I grew up in central Pennsylvania doing small game hunting after high school. And my world 50 caliber is actually not very small caliber. I took a tour of the base last year, and I was very impressed by the tour that they gave. The ranges that they're in use now, I think, are obviously very well run. Those are smaller caliber, but again, well below 50 caliber. My feeling is that, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, I don't think the Joint Base Cape Cod can be trusted. And I say that in part, the discussion earlier about the military not having a political agenda. I'm sorry, but General Foe's attempt to extort the business community of Cape Cod to support this range, which is exactly what he tried to do, really destroyed any trust I would have in the base. Earlier speaker was talking about facts. One real undisputable fact is they've already polluted the aquifer. That's why they spent more than $1 billion trying to clean it up. And they're not done yet, and they're probably never going to be done. I would hope that there would be some other alternative beyond Cape Cod that could be found for this range, but this is the wrong place. And if you can't put a machine gun range over Quabbin Reservoir, if you don't think the Boston would accept that, why should we be forced to accept it here? It should be defeated.
I live on 28 Pine Street, been here 5 years. I also support the Joint Base I did the tour. I thought it was wonderful. I thought their environmental work so far is terrific. I read the papers that they had guided me to on the studies they had done on copper contamination. I'm a physicist. I made some sense out of them. I was delighted that the EPA was brought in to study this deeper because it is a complex issue, trying to figure out how these metals and explosives and linings to this new ammunition is going to get from the surface down to our rather shallow water. I mean, we have an artesian well in downtown Sandwich. You can see every day if you walk by what the water table is. It's not very far down. I read the EPA's findings, and I was convinced that there were holes in the study that the Cape had done. And I'm glad they were brought in. If the EPA says we have a problem, or we may have a problem, you can't say with certainty what's going to happen when you have new ammunition with new levels of metals. It's a new situation. But if they're concerned, and we proceed, and our water turns out contaminated, we have nobody to blame but ourselves. I mean, I don't know why we're meeting here. If the EPA says it's bad, it's bad.
I've been a resident of Falmouth since 1990. My name is Marina Martini. I want to commend the Massachusetts Guard for their service. We need them, okay? But I also looked at their mission, and the mission of the Guard includes to provide trained and disciplined forces for domestic emergencies, not to create domestic emergencies. So, threatening to contaminate the drinking water of arguably 250,000 people, to my mind, is a domestic emergency. And I see it as contrary to the mission of the Guard. I think there are other solutions to this machine gun training range. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Fred DeCoster. I lived in Falmouth for quite a few years. I was born in a very distant land called New Bedford. And I've been a property owner on Cape Cod since 1981. And in light of the thousands of cancer cases on Cape Cod that are traceable to the groundwater, and admittedly other chemicals, the man's point on nitrogen and other forms of pollution is a very valid point here and everywhere from Florida to Canada. But I've been bringing spring water in containers to Cape Cod since 1981, and I don't think I'll be drinking the water on Cape Cod anytime soon. That said, I think it's important to just answer a couple of points out there too, that this is not a climate change issue. This is not a political issue. This is a health issue for the present population. of the Cape. And until about 10 minutes ago, there was no mention made, except by one astute commenter, that there is another gun range in the Commonwealth. And I think that's very important and should be addressed further. I know there's an argument that it's not satisfactory, but we need to hear more of that. I think everyone in this room, I doubt there's anyone in this room that really doesn't support our troops and that doesn't support the mission. The Colonel used the word, all the species that have been saved on Joint Base Cape Cod, and they're in charge of preserving our species. But the reality is that the species that we need to protect now on this particular issue is us, and we put our full faith and support behind the Guard and the Army and the Air Force. But this gun range should be not built on the Cape, and we should use the other resources that are available. Thank you very much.
Liz Daria, Hyannis native. I believe we're confronted with a political desired outcome in search of a problem. Therefore, I have a comment, and then I have a question to leave you all with. We need as many real men with guns on this island as possible, with a fake sheriff who's a lawyer with no law enforcement experience, and a rampant human and child sex trafficking run by MS-13, who hide out on tribal lands. I caught one. I'm fluent. Lived in 3 countries. And people pouring over the border are going somewhere. Can we agree on that? No. They're going somewhere, and there's an awful lot of young men that look military age. And the Chinese own a lot of land where they're setting up training camps. So wake up. Now here's the question I leave you with. Liberals, calm down, calm down.
Have a little courtesy.
I have equal time, please, US Constitution, okay? Why are we worrying so much about this aquifer? Meanwhile, we look the other way, already for years, for the billionaire coastline septic systems seriously polluting our inland waterways and bays. I'm a shell fisherman. We have to shut down Osterville now. It's like, even what we're getting, Bay Street, don't go there. It is so polluted because money buys what it wants. And they're destroying our bays. Let's take care of that first and not wrestle with a political desired outcome in search of a problem. Thank you very much.
Yes, hello, I'm Laura Lane from Sandwich. I must say that's a hard act to follow. I'm just here with some spontaneous comments I'd like to make at this meeting. I have been following the machine gun range. I have been on a tour of the Joint Base Cape Cod. I recommend anyone to go on that tour. I'm impressed with how they're managing their environment right now and taking care of the Superfund cleanup that happened a long time ago. But I must say, I think it's unfortunate that the JBCC is on top of the sole source aquifer on Cape Cod. And because of that, I think the JBCC has to take a hard look at that and say they need to do their machine gun range someplace else. We need to put a priority on our drinking water. It's not replaceable. Cape Cod is suffering right now. The lower Cape is under drought. The groundwater is going way down on many of the towns on the lower Cape, and the upper Cape is going to be in the same boat if we jeopardize our sole source of water. It's why we're alive, because we're drinking water. So I'm against the gun range. Thank you.
Barlow, I live in Bourne. I moved to the Cape in '89 from Illinois. It was an unfortunate time to move here. came out in the newspapers constantly, rising cancer rates on the Cape. You know, what's the problem? Where's it come from? They declared the Joint Base Cape Cod a Superfund site, and we spent decades buying bottled water. My brother, who we were so thrilled lived diagonally across the street, was so concerned that he moved his family off the Cape. We decided to stick it out, but it was a lot of bottled water, kind of holding my breath when I took a shower. I had several friends pass away during this period from various cancers. And, you know, I just don't think we need to, you know, add to that fear alone. And I don't think, you know, the tourism industry that we rely on so heavily needs to have that fear either.
You're here.
So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Malcolm Donald. I'm a town meeting member from Falmouth. And we in Falmouth are currently dealing, as everyone knows, with the current remediation of the Otis plume. In fact, my late father, worked on the citizen-led effort back in the 80s to bring attention to the military's earlier action resulting in the current Superfund cleanup. I'm here to say no to another reckless action by the military to endanger our sole source aquifer, remove so much wildlife habitat, and the forest's contribution to CO2 sequestration and mitigation to global climate change. I support the National Guard. I realize the importance to our freedom that a well-trained military ensures. However, considering the fact that there is another venue available for training, I heartily recommend the military use it and not put our sole source aquifer in jeopardy. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, my name is Jonathan Finn. I live in Sandwich. I moved here in 2016, so a relatively new resident. And I just want to say a couple of quick things, but one is, it doesn't matter. This issue has nothing to do with how long you've been on Cape Cod. This issue has to do with who's going to be on Cape Cod tomorrow, who's going to be on Cape Cod in the future, because they're the ones that will be faced with this issue. So 3 quick things. 1, the base has been and continues to be a Superfund cleanup site from past contamination, and remediation work continues. It's not done. 2, while the Army National Guard has multiple sites to provide training, our fragile coastal region has only one aquifer. We have one. And in terms of our health and drinking water, I put my trust into the determinations of the EPA and not the shaky track record of Joint Base Cape Cod. Thank you.
Thank you for coming and for your service and everyone's service. Like a lot of people have said, full support for the base, everything that the military does, national defense, all of that. So anything I have to say, I just want to have that there. My husband's from a military family, my father served, lots of friends in the Space Force, Coast Guard, Air Force that are on the base now, but deeply concerned about the environmental impact, like everyone said. The EPA's findings, sole source aquifer, one source, sandy soil, that I don't know if people know, talking about chemicals and stuff on the Cape, that makes us particularly susceptible to that leaching into the groundwater. Agree with other chemicals and fertilizers, they're all less chemicals, not more. So let's move on that. And to follow up with someone's point about the Forestdale School, if you look on the map, right over the border in Forestdale, where I live, is the Forestdale School. And I haven't heard anything about noise pollution potentially affecting them, if these children are going to be hearing gunfire, how that would affect our school safety plans. How do you determine what's real gunfire, what's not real gunfire, which is a huge problem that we're having in the community and obviously across the nation. So that really scares me. Also scared about the potential contamination to, the soil and just, it's right across the line, they're very close. And to all the residents in Forestdale, I live here. I'm afraid I could be hearing gunfire nonstop. My kids could be. And people have been mentioning drinking bottled water. I know a lot of stories, a lot of people who grew up with that, lots of cancer on the Cape. Bottled water is not accessible for everyone. There are a lot of people who have no choice but to drink the tap water, and they're putting that trust, and it's that unknown factor. We cannot guarantee that there will not be further contamination, and as we've discussed, we're trying to clean up the contamination that's already occurred. So very respectful, and I know there's often a not in my backyard to a lot of this, but Cape Cod's basically an island geographically, and our water supply is as well. So I think it would be worth looking elsewhere that's not quite such a susceptible environment for the contamination of groundwater, and the consideration for the proximity to our schools and our neighborhoods and how that could be affected, because I haven't yet to hear anything about the sound of gunfire and how that would be affected. But it's hard for me to believe if you look on here that there wouldn't be. I want to hear more about that, and I'm deeply concerned about how that would affect our schools and our residents. Thank you.
Matt Cronin from Falmouth. I'm very thankful that we have this session tonight where people can give their views on this program. Several months ago, I attended a program over on the base. It was conducted by the military, for the military. Very little input was allowed by outsiders. They talked a lot about their environmental efforts on the base, many of which were very laudable. However, after that meeting, I never had any true faith in what the environmental impact would be in taking down about 200 acres of good trees over an aquifer. They were giving all kinds of reasons how they could relocate the animals and everybody would be hunky-dory, but the fact that this aquifer is our only source of water, we have no reservoirs, is a critical issue. The Guard or the Army or whoever was conducting business on this base for years has been lax in their husbandry of taking care of that property, much to the chagrin of many Cape Codders. I don't think that putting this gun range over the aquifer is a very sane project. We have Fort Devens not too far away where there's many areas where you can fire machine guns. Most of the people coming to the base are coming from off Cape, from Western Mass, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island. To go to Devens isn't an issue. They can fix the ranges there with the money that's being appropriated here. A short time ago, I read in the paper that the EPA gave their advice on this and did not look kindly towards it. A couple days later, I read in the paper that the commandant or whatever he is on the base said, you know, so be it, the EPA gave their opinion. I still want to go along with building my ranges. It's kind of like a personal thing that he wants this is his game. And it's not good for Cape Cod, and I don't think it should be allowed. I think more study needs to be done. And if we look in the past, the way that the base is operated, I, for one, have little faith in the outcome of this operation. I thank you.
My name is Susan Starkey from Yarmouthport, and I'm in some ways representing the Faith Communities Environmental Network, although I'm speaking on my own behalf. But there's 40 faith communities that have been following this issue since there's a little tiny article, or just a little tiny notice back in 2020 that the Joint Base Cape Cod was open for public comments. And so we've been following this closely. I really have 2 points to make. One is about transparency, and the other is about innovation. So starting with that little tiny ad that said they're open to public input, which nobody hardly saw, but luckily one faith community member did. We have not seen there be transparency from the Joint Base. They say that they're open, they say they read all of our responses when it was 370 some responses, and they did put little paragraphs in of highly technical language that didn't transparently communicate to us as residents who need to drink this water and live on this land and not see trees cut down. So that's one message to the Joint Base, is to say, please, if you want to be involved with us, we are in this together. So we're in the same boat, swim with us and let us collaborate with you. The second point is around innovation. Instead of arguing about whose study is right, none of us really believe that if you study yourself, that's the study we ought to listen to. We're much more inclined to listen to the study that is done objectively and across many more metrics. What we need is innovation. Like we're all learning how to use social media. There are many people Zooming in tonight. Certainly my niece, who's in the Air Force, is very proud of her simulator training. And then of course she does training on the ground and in the air as well. But there are innovations to be had. Let us as citizens work together with the Joint Base, with all of our political leaders as well, to come up with solutions for 2030 and beyond. We're in a new place, a new day, and it's time to make some changes. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Christopher Noel Hall. I live here in Sandwich. I feel a little foolish being up here because I've heard so many things that I agree with. I also support the military. I understand their need. But for me, it comes down to a very simple thing.
You can please speak closer to the mic.
Excuse me?
Closer to the microphone.
What? Did you not hear me?
Yeah. Now I can.
Oh, you didn't hear me before? Oh my God, I'm an actor. I should be able to reach the back wall. I heard a lot of things that I agree with. I also support the military. How could we not, especially in this day and age? However, for me, it comes down to one point and one point only, and that is morality. I understand military's need, and I'm sympathetic with it, but we only have one aquifer. To me, there's no choice. It's not a matter of which one. This is what we have to live with. This is what future generations have to live with. It may be difficult for the military to find another place to do their fire range, but morally, you have to. You have to. You can't be playing with our water. So, anyway, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rick Jorgensen. I've lived here in Forestdale since 2013 after retiring from a career with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I wanted to highlight one of the points of the introduction, the very informative introduction the EPA made. We are a country that is governed by the rule of law. And EPA cannot permit the spending of federal dollars that may pollute a sole source aquifer. It's cut and dry. And the many very, very eloquent speakers today pointed out that the risk is just too great in the absence of certainty for us to allow our sole source aquifer to suffer any further degradation as a result of ill-advised, ill-informed, and unnecessary military activity that's going to affect this peninsula for generations. And I want to thank EPA for standing up and doing the right thing and making this hearing available to all forms of comment, including those who are inclined to wear tinfoil hats. Thank you.
My name is Matthew Porter. So, federal employee, base manager for Camp Edwards. I'm also a colonel in the Mass Army National Guard. I just want to make a couple points, a couple things I've heard talked about throughout this hearing. Just a couple areas where I think I could clarify a few things. Just first on the opening statement from the EPA, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we are a dual mission organization. So it's not just the state mission that we have. It's not just domestic. In fact, this machine gun range really is for our federal mission. Particularly, we don't generally respond to domestic operations with machine guns. We respond overseas. And that's an important note, and I'm not sure why that was left out, because I know we clarified that a couple times at the EPA during the process. So just if you don't mind making that correction, that'd be very good, thank you. The other thing is, I know the perception is that it's just the base that sits atop the sole source aquifer. We all sit atop the sole source aquifer. This is an unconstrained aquifer. We just happen to sit on top of it, we're at the top of the actual aquifer. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about things. So when we talk about copper bullets that we're firing, I know most of you probably drink water through copper pipes, and that's important to note because if you were very concerned about it, and I know fear is very important and it's very powerful emotion, but you drink water through copper pipes as well. We're talking about copper that we're putting into the actual onto the range, and that copper has been very well studied. So I mean, the EPA was actually part of the scoping, conversation when we actually had that study, and we started to, talk to the lab on what we wanted the study to do. The EPA was involved with that. It wasn't just us, Mass Army National Guard, doing that. EPA was part of that. Oversight. We are a very heavily regulated organization. The base does not do anything within that upper 15,000 acres without all the commissioners that fall under, the commissioners of the DCR commissioner, the Fish and Wildlife, and the DEP. So that EMC body also has a science advisory council that reports up to them, and also has a community advisory council that reports up to them. They have an environmental regulator that investigates all of our ranges constantly to make sure that they're in compliance with Chapter 47, which is a law that is meant to regulate our ranges. So it's very important to note, and I know the EPA knows that as well. And the EPA has purview over that, but also in 2015 decision document, they also declared and stated that small arms ranges do not contribute to the contamination in the aquifer. They also state that the propellants that are used in small arms also don't contaminate the aquifer. They actually combine with nitrocellulose and are bound in the soils. That is a very important piece, and there are these facts that help for your understanding, so you can, that fear is not so powerful, and you can actually understand what the actual problem is. And that's how we get through this together. Also, we do have a website that is important to note, and I know we put that out there on all our tours, and we invite you to come out to our tours and see that. We've heard several comments and several testimony about how good those tours are. They really are well done. We pay close attention to Chapter 47, and we're talking about protection of the habitat, protection of the aquifer, and compatible military training, and what it is that we do and what we try to do, and how we try to involve the public more and more. We do understand that after 9/11 that things tended to shut down on the base, and maybe there was some apprehension and some concern because you didn't get to see it. We're trying to get you out there, so please come out. We have room for you guys to participate in these tours. I think they're well done. I think you'll have a greater understanding of what it is that we do. On that website that I mentioned, we have all the documents that went into, whether it's the EPA process, the MEPA process, the noise study. It's very, those things are available to you to look at. So I know there's some people that had some questions about what was actually available for them to look at, and they don't have a lot of information. All that information is public to you. And I know I heard some comments about the school, the Forest Hill School. I understand that fear. That's a valid concern, but we are a National Guard force. We fire on the weekends. We fire mostly in the weekends and in the summer. And so it just happens to be very compatible with schools, because they aren't going to school on the weekends, and they generally aren't going to school during the summer. So that's just important to note, and it's just understanding these facts that help to kind of, at least if you're going to have a fear about something, have it be legitimate on things that are actually real, and that's
is now officially closed, and Rosa, you can stop the recording. Thank you, everyone.